I've spent the last few years exploring and road tripping all over the New England area in the fall, and I've picked up quite a few best practices for making the most out of exploring the area. So in this video, I wanted to share 10 tips on how to make the most of your road trip in New England this fall. My name is Matt Zeffi. I post overlanding and camping adventure videos and also gear review videos of some of the things that I think are great to take out in nature and that are really helpful. Which brings us to today's video, where I want to share some tips on how to make the most of your New England road trip. So get your Noah Kahan playlist ready. We're going on a road trip. So starting with number one, I'm gonna be honest with you, you are not the only person with this idea. Everybody is flocking to the New England area around this time of year. Fall is just one of those times where it's like a Hallmark movie up there, and everything just looks so beautiful, with the colors gradually changing the further south you go as time progresses. And because of that, it brings with so many people coming across the country, and especially coming from the New York area. I mean, you have to think there are tens of millions of people in this area alone, and everybody is just going up to the New England area to try and see the first signs of fall. And it is an exciting thing, so I fully get it. But because of that, there's going to be a lot of people. And one of those things with road tripping, in a lot of ways, we want to get away from the crowds, especially coming from New York. I do my best to try and get away from the crowds, and that's some of the biggest reasons that I end up doing road trips around the Northeast. But I will say that to avoid all of those crowds, you're going to want to aim for the weekdays. Do your best to aim for the weekdays, because the weekends around the fall time, especially in the New England area, White Mountains especially, I've seen traffic in the White Mountains on the weekend on Kankamagus Highway. So my first tip is to do your best to try and get weekdays. This goes pretty much without saying, but especially in the New England area in the fall. Number two, in the same breath, maybe you're someone who has to go on the weekends. That's perfectly fine. It's better to go than not go at all, in my opinion. But if you can, try and aim for the early and end parts of the day. That's the best light, especially as a filmmaker, photographer. The best light is going to be around the sunrise time. Goes without saying. And that's also going to be the least crowded time, because people are just sleeping in. So if you want to see these spectacular sights in one, the most beautiful time of day, and also two, at the least crowded times of day, then aim for the sunrise. Also in the evening, everybody is going off to have dinner. That's another fantastic time to hit some of those iconic spots. Tip number three, and this one's kind of a two-part tip. Because it gets a little bit more crowded in the fall, definitely book your campgrounds ahead of time if you can. It's probably already booked up in many cases, especially the more popular campgrounds, and thankfully there's a lot of walk-in reservation campgrounds that only allow people to show up at the time of day, especially in the White Mountains. This is especially prevalent. And I love campgrounds that have that, because I'm someone who does not like booking campgrounds or anything in advance. I kind of like just showing up. And it can be a little bit problematic in the New England area in the fall time, because I've missed out on some of the better campgrounds because of it. So it's kind of a multifaceted thing. If you want to stay at some of those better campgrounds, I'm talking like Seawall in Acadia National Park and those sorts of places, then you definitely want to book it in advance. However, if you are booking things in advance, try and leave a little bit of room for some spontaneity. One of my favorite things about road tripping is the freedom that comes along with it. So overall, try and book some of your campgrounds in advance, but not all of them, and leave some room for spontaneity. Number four, a lot of those more accessible areas are going to be more crowded, obviously. So northern Maine, I will just say, it's practically Canada, first of all, but second of all, it's so empty up there. It's just like there's nobody up there, and it's one of the most beautiful areas of the country. And you get like the moose up there, you get the incredible foliage, and then there's like these side roads that are just, everything looks so cinematic. And the best part is there's just not a lot of people up there. So even like around Mount Katahdin and Baxter State Park, which does fill up with people trying to hike Mount Katahdin, yet still it's very limited and there's not a lot of people up there. So my fourth tip would be to don't exclude northern Maine. I know it's far, it gets really up there, but it's truly one of the most spectacular places. With the major advantage of you'll probably see moose up there. It's not guaranteed, but it's kind of around the rut time as well. I actually was flying my drone last year to film the sunset, and it was like a huge bonus because I'm trying to film the sunset with my drone, and at the corner I see these two little brown specks, and I couldn't believe it because it was two moose in the foreground of the video, and I was looking for them the entire time, so I was really stoked. Next tip, and this is really for the folks that are the foodies out there. You are not me. I am not that at all. I bring all of my food with me, but that's something that I would recommend because a lot of the places in New England do tend to close early, especially in the more, countryside areas. And that's something you want to consider if you are trying to book a restaurant or something past 9. It can get a little bit complicated, and even if you do, they tend to be absolutely packed because there are just so many people in the area and they don't really have the infrastructure to accommodate that year round. So especially in the fall, it becomes a problem. So if you can, bring your food with the advantage of, if everybody's going to get dinner at the same exact time at night, which happens to be around sunset, you could just maybe run to the grocery store, grab food, and take it to a beautiful location and have dinner there. That's one of my favorite options, and I sometimes do that for breakfast as well. So one of my biggest tips is to bring your food. Just make sure that you're prepared, because while it is one of the most beautiful areas, they don't have that many restaurants. Number 6, don't shy away from the bad weather. This one is absolutely huge, especially in the fall time. I know those bluebird sky days and the complementary colors with the orange is one of the best things. It just looks so beautiful, especially on camera. However, those bad weather days are just as iconic in the fall. I'm talking like those moody, rainy, foggy days. Well, it makes the mornings feel so beautiful when the fog is laying low on the water. So if you're seeing some bad weather in the forecast, don't fret. Can't go wrong with some moody New England weather. And because of that, don't forget your rain layers. Make sure that you always have those packed. And it could get kind of cold if you're in the more mountainous areas. So make sure that you're packing for the layers. The nighttime gets much colder, especially if you're in mountainous areas. Next, don't leave out all of those iconic New England foods, whether it be like the cider donuts or the maple syrup that happens to be all over the place. And one of my friends was telling me that you have to have the maple lattes. I haven't personally had them, and I've been there multiple times. So now I'm like, I gotta go back this year especially and get these maple lattes. Pumpkin spice lattes, you guys are a thing of the past because New England has maple lattes. So I'm going to be checking that out this year. But also, there's blueberry pancakes that are in like Maine area with the wild blueberries. It's just, there's so much to eat in the area that it's definitely worth having all of that. Maple ice cream, maple coffee. There's just so much. And also, there's so many coffee shops around the New England area that are some of my favorite places to visit. And going back to what I was saying about the sunrise, sunset sort of thing, in the middle of the day, that tends to be the most packed in many of these areas. So I often will like retreat to a coffee shop, post up for most of the middle of the day, and then leave there once it gets a little bit less crowded throughout the day. It's just like a perfect way to get some work done if I'm still doing work while up in the New England area, and then it helps to just dodge the crowds. A couple of coffee shops that I really recommend is I think the Moon Cafe in Lincoln, New Hampshire, and also on the North Conway side or the Conway side of the Kankamagus Highway has to be Sweet Maple Cafe. Such a fantastic cafe, 10 out of 10 recommend. Also, if you're interested in seeing some of my favorite spots, like lesser known areas and also like specific coffee shops and good breakfast places in the New England area, I have a free guide in the description down below. Next, and my friend actually recommended this one for the video and I took it very personally, and that is to always keep your gas tank full. And there's some backstory to this because a few years ago when I went on a road trip up to the New England area, I actually ran out of gas in one of these very tiny towns in Maine. I had no idea that I basically was bouncing from different gas stations to the next one, and many of them closed their pumps at a certain time. And even though they accepted credit card and all that, the pumps were just completely turned off. And since then, I've actually put an emergency gas tank on my Jeep because of that entire situation. Last but not least, this one I'm a little bit biased on, but don't leave out some of the areas around the New England area as well. And I'm talking about New York, of course, because New York and upstate New York has some of the most beautiful spots to hit during the fall. And the Adirondacks and Catskills region is just absolutely spectacular around this time of year, so I definitely recommend checking it out if you have the time. If you're in Vermont and want to jump over to New York, maybe don't drive around Lake Champlain, but take a ferry across Lake Champlain. It's such a beautiful boat ride, and it's just so cool to have your car on one of those ferries. It's so much fun, and so I definitely recommend trying that out if you're in that area. Also, if you're interested in seeing my 5 must-see places in New England around this time of year, definitely check out that video with the link above. But hey, let me know in the comments down below, are you going to New England this fall? We would love to hear from you. And also, if you've been to the area and you have some favorite recommendations, drop those in the comments down below. If you got anything out of this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are new here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you out there on the road.